Да вот я за все расскажу в общем. Вот у нас в обществе, блядь, благодаря, блядь, контролю, блядь, за интернетом американцами, нахуй, полностью глобально контролируется, блядь, эта вся хуйня, информационные потоки, нахуй. Это уже, блядь, длится, нахуй, с 90-х годов. У нас поколению внушили, нахуй, что у них все там заебато, все охуенно, рай на земле, светочи демократии и все дела, нахуй. А у нас все говно, правительство говно, депутаты говно, блядь, менты козлы, блядь, всюду, блядь, дерьмо одно, нахуй. Хотя, блядь, дорог понастроили хуево тучу. В каждой семье, блядь, машин ебаться в рот, нахуй. 1-2 точно есть. У кого нету машины в семье, это просто он не хочет ее купить, нахуй. Или не может, потому что не имеет прав, нахуй. А и при желании, то есть, как поднялось благосостояние после 90-х, охуенно. А нам все время впаривают, что мы живем в говне и в дерьме, а Запад живет вот примерно на войне, нахуй. Ебаный рот. Самые крутые в мире, блядь, леопарды, блядь. Это пиздец, это супер техника, супер пиздец вообще, нахуй, ебаный рот, нахуй, блядь. Приехали, нахуй, и умылись тут, нахуй, все, блядь, кровью, нахуй, эти леопарды. Ни автоматозаряжания, ни хуя ничего нет. Все, блядь, нахуй, тяжеленные, буксуют, нихуя толку от них нет. Вон их похуярили сколько, напротив нас, вот здесь, нахуй, ебать. Кладбище, нахуй, устроили, ебаный рот. Точно так же с ихними самыми крутыми Абрамсами будет. Тоже это все распиаренная хуйня. И так во всем. Любой наш автомобиль возьми военный, нахуй, блядь, и ихний, нахуй. У нас, блядь, жрет, что хочешь, нахуй, блядь. На коленке можно сделать, отремонтировать. У нас, блядь, техника, блядь, вот эта вся, она предназначена для войны. А у них она предназначена для тухлых, блядь, понтов, нахуй, блядь. Вот попонтоваться, смотри, как он крутой. У него там то, все, хуе-мое, нахуй, ебать. Вот покупайте наши. Они же, сука, торгаши, нахуй. Вот они и впаривают по всему миру. Ихний Патриот, нахуй, в жопе, нахуй. Сука, нахуй, наш, блядь, самолет, нахуй, за раз, блядь. Он, блядь, выпускает 35 всех своих ракет, нахуй, по ложным целям, нахуй. И наш самолет его спокойненько въебывает. Охуенно супер патриот, нахуй, которым всем впаривают. Саудовской Аравии, Корее, блядь, Японии, Европе, блядь. Всем-всем. А мы, оказывается, вот так, опа, имеем, нахуй, и все. И чё, нахуй, эти американцы, нахуй. Да обосрались, нахуй. И еще обосрутся, нахуй, блядь. У меня все, нахуй.
Отлично, спасибо.
Everything this Russian soldier who's sitting on the trenches of the front lines in Ukraine is saying is demonstrably accurate. For a long time, and perhaps since the fall of the Soviet Union Empire in 1991, and the decade of humiliation faced by Russians in the 90s, while their economy and country was in shambles, it was easy to believe the narrative that everything from the West was superior. Because quite frankly, at that time, it was true. But I submit that this war has exposed serious holes in the theory of Western superiority. First is the ability of Russia to withstand 10 sanction packages and not only be able to grow its economy in 2023 as projected by the IMF, but to now outperform many Western European countries like Germany, formerly known as the economic powerhouse of Europe, and the United Kingdom, who is currently suffering a cost of living crisis. This no doubt would have given massive confidence to the Putin administration and to the Russian public that they no longer are dependent on Western trade and can stand on their own 2 feet economically. But more interestingly is the myth of Western superiority on the battlefield. This summer counteroffensive was orchestrated by NATO itself. They spent months training Ukrainians to NATO standards and on NATO weaponry and equipped them with Leopard tanks, Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, and a myriad of other NATO weapons. And it is failing miserably. Even the West admits this. NATO tactics have run into the Russian wall of steel, and as documented by my previous videos, within the first week of the offensives, pictures of tank graveyards filled with NATO equipment spread across social media. Even the German Defense Minister, Mrs. Annalena Baerbock, I believe her name is, asked everyone not to call all Leopard tanks German. But even before this war, the fragility of US weapons was being evidenced. So there are 3 articles I wanted to look at briefly today that proves that the supposed superiority of Western weapons is really a myth. Before we get into today's video, I'd like you to hit the subscribe button, as this is a new channel and it will help promote this channel in the algorithm. So now, without further ado, let's get into it. So let's take these articles in chronology. The first article is from NBC News, and I always say this: look at the reporting about America and Russia prior to the invasion by President Putin in February 2022 last year, and you see how much more accurate and objective the publishing from Western media is about Russia, about Ukraine, and about the American military. So this article is entitled "In Deadly 2008 Afghan Battle, US Weapons Failed." A study of the July 13, 2008 attack of a remote US outpost in Afghanistan found that weapons failed repeatedly at a critical moment during the firefight that left 9 US soldiers dead. So this is an old article, so I'm not going to read a lot of it, but I just want to give you a gist of the point of this video. This article really talks about assault rifles made by the US, in particular the M4 assault rifle. So here's what it says. This is a study based on interviews from survivors from the battle in Afghanistan. The soldiers said their weapons were meticulously cared for and routinely inspected by commanders, but still the weapons had breakdowns, especially when the rifles were on full automatic, which allows hundreds of bullets to be fired a minute. Corporal Jonathan Ayers and SPC Chris McCaig were firing their M4s from a position the soldiers called the crow's nest. The pair would pop up together from cover, fire half a dozen rounds, and then drop back down. In quotation, "My weapon was overheating," McKegg said. According to Cubberson's report, I had shot about 12 magazines by this point already, and it had only been about a half hour or so into the fight. I couldn't charge my weapon and put another round in because it was too hot, so I got mad and threw my weapon down. The soldiers also had trouble with their M249 machine guns, a larger weapon than the M4 that can shoot up to 750 rounds per minute. Corporal Jason Bogar fired approximately 600 rounds from his M249 before the weapon overheated and jammed the weapon. This article from Foreign Policy is even more relevant and even more damning for the US administration and the military-industrial complex. It talks about the vaunted US Patriot missile defense system, which they have given to Ukraine and which they claim has shot down Kinzhal missiles, which travel at Mach 7 and Mach 10 speed. Now, I made a video about this, and you should check it out right here. And I referenced this article in the video. So I'm going to read you the title, and then I'm going to play a clip of my earlier video where I read out parts of this article, which speak at how poorly the US Patriot missile defense system has performed in Saudi Arabia back in 2018, when the Saudi Arabians were fighting against a third-tier militia force, the Houthis, firing Bukan missiles, which travel at a speed of about 600 miles per hour. And the Patriot missile could not even shoot that down. And the point I made in my video is that you expect us to believe that a Patriot system, which couldn't shoot down a Bukan missile traveling at 600 miles per hour, is now able to shoot down a Kinzhal missile traveling at up to 7,000 miles per hour in Ukraine. But here's the title of the article. Patriot missiles are made in America and fail everywhere. The evidence is in. The missile defense system that the United States and its allies rely on is a lemon. And here's a clip of the video I made. On the 25th of March, Houthi forces in Yemen fired 7 missiles at Riyadh. Saudi Arabia confirmed the launches and asserted that it successfully intercepted all 7. This wasn't true. It's not just that falling debris in Riyadh killed at least 1 person and sent 2 more to the hospital. There's no evidence that Saudi Arabia intercepted any missiles at all. And that raises uncomfortable questions, not just about the Saudis, but about the United States, which seems to have sold them and its own public a lemon of a missile defense system. Social media images do appear to show that Saudi Patriot batteries firing interceptors. But what these videos show are not successes. One interceptor explodes catastrophically just after launch, while another makes a U-turn in midair and then comes screaming back at Riyadh, where it explodes on the ground. Now we arrive at the most important article. It's from an Indian media outlet entitled Frontier India, and it's entitled, well, it was published on the 18th of May 2022, so this is after the Russian invasion into Ukraine last February. And here's the title: Why are US weapons failing in Ukraine? On the 18th of May, Russian unmanned aerial vehicles and artillery reconnaissance near Podgorodny in Sevastopol detected the firing position of the US-supplied 155mm M77 towed howitzers firing position of the Ukraine armed forces. This is the same artillery shell for the M77 that President Biden just said in an interview with CNN and Fareed Zakaria that they're running out of these shells, and that's why they have to send the banned clustered munitions.
The Ukrainians are running out of ammunition. The ammunition that they call them 155 millimeter weapons. This is a war relating to munitions, and they're running out of that ammunition, and we're low on it.
The failure of the M77 gun is too early to predict, but it does show a pattern of failures of the American weapons, both operational and in doctrine. Title of this next section is Javelin was supposed to burn all Russian equipment. The United States has delivered about 7,000 Javelin anti-tank missile systems, ATGMs, to Ukraine. The problem with the Javelins is both tactical and doctrinal. The Ukrainian prisoners of war state that the US help was overhyped. The Javelins were either outdated or unkempt, and often misfired. The instructors ignored the misfires and gave them basic information on how to fire the missiles. The heavy Javelins were unsuitable for urban combat, as well as in rural and remote areas. In rural and remote areas, the possibility of meeting Russian armor was remote, and the operators were exposed to spying Russian UAVs and helicopters. The Javelins, which ended up as trophies with the Russians and Donetsk militia, were termed junk. In fact, in the initial days of the war, the Russians spoke about the US establishing an office in Lvov to prevent Ukrainians from speaking out on Javelin's issues. Next, we talk about Stinger missiles that didn't sting. Stinger manpads, which received fame in Afghanistan, were of very little effectiveness in Ukraine. Just like the T-72s on the ground, the Russian helicopters ruled the air in Ukraine. There are few videos about Stingers shooting Russian helicopters, but largely they have been ineffective. The Russian MOD released a video of a Ka-52 gunship pilot who explained how to avoid a Stinger. So, is it safe to say that the age of Western weapon superiority is over and the rise of Russian weapons is at hand? Well, as this war continues and the failures of the Ukraine counteroffensive mounts, it seems that this theory is becoming more accurate.